Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Safety Brief. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today I'm joined by Matt and Mike. As always, thank you both for being here. So
Thanks for
today
having me.
we're, oh, sorry. Of course. Today we're diving into the differences between penetration testing and vulnerability testing. So, how about we start by breaking down the fundamental differences between the two? Can you explain in simple terms how they differ from one another?
Matt, why don't you lead off on this one?
Okay, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to or not.
Yeah,
All right.
please.
So, interestingly enough, one can encompass the other, but the other in another situation cannot encompass the other. I know that sounds confusing. So, let's start with the baseline here. A vulnerability scan. Vulnerability scan is going to look at whatever you are specifying, whether it's web for vulnerability scan, application vulnerability scan, your operating system, which we know has many vulnerabilities to scan, or however you have it configured. You're looking for areas of weakness that you need to shore up. Now, that can be used as a part of a penetration test. Penetration testing is designed to go from the outside. Think your house. Mike likes this reference. It's your house. A vulnerability scan, you're already in the house. You have access, you're running, you're testing, you're looking to see, can you find the James Bondish hidden cave inside the house and then exploit that in some way, shape, or form? Penetration testing, you're outside the house. You're having to go against the security system to get into the house, at which point you can start leveraging vulnerability scans to find things to exploit internally.
Yeah, spot on, Matt. In the I do like house analogies. I find that they're applicable to most people with a home. So, um, one thing that I've heard recently that's been helpful is really truly the home inspector. What role does the home inspector? A lot of
Mhm.
people buying a home, at least more the past 2 months than maybe in the Q4 of last year. And a lot of people are going through home inspections, right? And it's a stressful time. Why is it a stressful time? Well, you're about to spend a lot of money, more than you probably spend on anything else in your life, on a house that could come with some risk, right? And if you're an IT provider, if you're an IT help desk or a director, you're picking up what I'm putting down. That we inherit these end users that might come with some risk. It's the reality of it, and there's no real way to measure what that risk looks like outside of routine scientific methodical ways like a vulnerability scan, right? And so when you invite a home inspector into your home, obviously the seller of the home is conceding to it. Obviously, as the buyer, you're the one pushing for it because you'd like to know, hey, what am I getting myself into? I've seen a lot of MSP partners and IT teams that before they onboard a new client will conduct a vulnerability scan. It's like, hey, we don't know where you're at. We want just like a benchmark bill of health to understand where you currently are in your journey. And I don't want to say like there's a pass or fail of a vulnerability scan, right? Like anybody can go into a gym and get their benchmark 1 mile time. That could be a great time for a marathon runner. It could be a great time for a 60-year-old individual, right? Like it doesn't, there's no like winning or passing or failing exam, right? As a vulnerability scan, but it's more so a illuminating practice. It's a ritual. It's really to see, hey, where could we true up? Where could we create gap, or where could we create strategy around gap, around cybersecurity gap? And so, that's going to be the biggest difference, I think. The vulnerability scan is an educational. I don't know what I don't know, but I'd like to know more type test. And just like Matt said really eloquently, was the penetration test is typically done once you've bolstered your defenses, once you have gone through the routine exercises of, hey, I've shored up endpoint. Hey, I've shored up what I can do on the Office 365 and the cloud SaaS side. Hey, I've looked at my firewall, I've reviewed the ACLs, I've removed unnecessary ports, and I've done that, right? I've done my hardening. Now I'm going to invite a vulnerability scan, and I'm going to see where can I even push the further? Where can I even go? Hey, I got a 9-minute mile time. I've done pretty good. Hey, change your stride, do these shoes, grab these insoles, whatever it is. You can move 20 seconds off your time, right? Like it's a little bit more. And then it's race day. And that's race day, baby. That's what penetration testing is. And so what you're going to find is there's an order of operations to this. Like Mike Tarango, our director of technology, did a really good job of articulating it that way, was specifically outlining that it's a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. So this one might actually boil some blood in here today, but I won't name any names. But we've seen instances where companies ask MSPs to lower security. As you just said, normally you want to have, your full stack and you're testing your security abilities um, before running those scans. So when selecting a company for cybersecurity services like these scans, what key factors should MSPs look for to integrate the solutions and actually benefit from the scans? Kind of going back into that home analogy, you're not going to set your alarm and then leave your front door open, or lock your car and leave all the windows down. So
Okay. I'm gonna start in on this because there's a couple different things that you need to really consider when it comes to vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. First and foremost, when you are looking for somebody who is going to provide that for your company, your MSP, or you're looking to provide it to your customers as an MSSP, there's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration. First off is what level of testing are you looking to do? This isn't one size fits all. This isn't like, going to Gap and getting those flex fit clothes or something like that. There's different levels of this. You've got white box, you've got gray box, you've got black box. A lot of the solutions that I see on the market are asking you for white box. They're saying we will go through and we'll do, a vulnerability scan, or we'll do a penetration test, but you need to give us the keys to the kingdom in order for this to be, completed in our way of doing things. That's nice. That's great. It's useless. You're giving somebody full access and then they're saying, well, we were able to do this. Really? Cool. I'm pretty sure if I give you the keys to my car and you go out and get a speeding ticket and say, look what I was able to do, I'm not going to be shocked at all. Maybe a little bit when you don't have any information about the car, but congratulations on not getting arrested. That's almost the same level as what I look at with these vulnerability scans. When you go to gray box, it's a little bit tougher. You're giving a little bit of permission to the application. You're not giving a lot. You may be giving them an account or a specific machine that they can try to get a foothold on. You're not giving them the entire keys to the kingdom. The ultimate test and what you should be looking at is black box. You've got all of your security in place. Their job is to try and get around that. Why help them? If they can't get in through your perimeter, what are they going to tell you? They couldn't get in. There's nothing they can do. That's what you're looking at. You want something like that. Now, the other thing is, if you are ever provided an executable and they say, please put this on the allow list so that it's able to run and your AV solution doesn't pick it up, that's not a scan. That's a waste of your time. That's not something that should ever happen. And the last thing I'll say, and Mike, I know you're going to probably have some fun with this. When you are running one of these tests, if it does not map back to a legitimate framework, you have wasted money. If you cannot have a vulnerability scan that ties back specifically to a MITRE framework to tell you what TTPs are being used, there is no way that it's going to help you. Saying we were able to do this, cool. What did you use to do that so we can shore this up? Telling us is one thing. Scaring us is one thing. Showing us what we need to actually fix and what we actually need to shore up, that's the entire premise of having a vulnerability scan done or having penetration testing done. It's so you can better yourselves, not so you can pay somebody to say, well, we'll do this for you, but it's going to cost you. Okay, well, now you're incentivized to try and do anything you can to make it look like things failed, including saying, let us through your AV solution, and then reporting the AV solution didn't actually prevent it. It's a cute tactic. Let me tell you, that's great. Mike, go for it. I know you want to.
Yeah, man. We're gonna hop in the time machine here on the safety brief. We're gonna go back to like elementary school, and down in South Florida, I remember going to school, elementary, middle school. We'd have tornado drills at school, or fire drills at school, and that's a routine thing. Why did we do that? Well, you train like you fight. If you're in the military, you understand that mindset. But you don't want to find out how to evacuate a building in the event of a fire when there's a fire, right? You practice it, you rehearse it. So, but there was something that some teachers would do that would maybe mar the results accuracy of said fire drill. And what would they do? All right, students, in about 8 minutes, we're going to have a fire drill. And you're not supposed to know. But when it happens, here's where we're going. Because they wanted to look better than every other class out there, right? What is going on here? Well, I'll tell you. Number one, that's not a legitimate test. That's not a legitimate test, right? Like the moment that the fire alarm goes off, instinct should hit training. Then you should know your evacuation route. You can't be told, well, mini man, mini girl, there's about to be a fire. Let's get outside, right? Like if you number one, if you lower the cost of the test, the results are going to reflect, right? And so, I've seen other people where, I had a recent interaction where we had a partner come to us and say, well, what happens if, I do a vulnerability scan and the results make me look bad? Because I've been managing their environment. Like, what if I look bad? And again, this is where I'd evoke, not that that's a negative thing to say. I understand that. But I think, at Blockworks, we specifically have a core value that says winning or learning. And winning or learning means is that we're never losing if we're learning. And if we're not learning, we're winning, right? So life gives us two options and two paths, right? Every single vulnerability scan we offer, you get two opportunities. You can either win, you get validation. That's a great score, man. That's like we did really, really well. We've done a lot of due diligence to shore up a lot of different controls, and that's great. You're winning. That's celebratory. And then you look at this exam and you're like, wow, like score is pretty low. There's a pretty long list of things to shore up. Well, you learned a bunch of stuff you didn't know yesterday about your security stack, and that's still winning, right? And that's why I think, again, it requires a mindset shift. But, I joke, Elizabeth, to your question being about what happens when we see tools try to say, hey, we want to test the posture of your security. Can you let them know we're testing? Or could you let them know to turn their mechanisms off? Or, hey, can you disable before we run this scan? Because if the scan can't run, we can't be told we're vulnerable. And I was like, well, yeah, actually, yeah, I guess that'd be a pretty fun home inspection if you left all the water running. Yeah, if you want to bomb an inspection, there's ways to rig the test. But I use the elementary and middle school analogy in comic relief, but I see a lot of people doing that with technology. They're doing this as a check the box. No different than that teacher. Like, hey, I want to perform well. I want to look good. And, but there's a culture of integrity. There's a culture of competency that says, hey, we're either winning or we're learning. Cyber is a never ending battle. Matt, I know you give an eloquent TED talk on, we're always evolving. We're always growing. And that's true. That's real, man. But I think, you got to approach it wanting to learn something. Don't run a vulnerability scan unless you're ready to learn something. It's like if you're not ready for whatever that scan is going to show you, and then take action on, that's just like, again, you go to the gym and you have a body assessment or a benchmark time. Like, be ready to be told you got some work to do. And if there's anything about being in the military, maybe later in life or joining later in life than others, be ready to be told in ways that you can improve. And that's healthy, though. It's a culture. If you lean into it, you get really, really good. But again, I say that because it just goes back to that class, man. Hey, we're going to have a fire drill. And it's like, come on, man, let the test be real. So, I would say for those that are considering vulnerability scans, you can always set expectations, right? Preface it. Hey, we've never run something like this before. It's a new piece of technology. It's a new tool. We're curious to see what the findings are. Why? Because anything on there is something that we can be better at. And if that's what we're doing, then we're only getting better. And I don't see that as a negative. If I'm a business owner and I'm, asking somebody to come in and conduct my security, I don't see that as a negative. Maybe I don't. Maybe I got a different mindset, and maybe more people should think like this. I don't know. But specifically, like, I'm thinking, hey, like, I'm really glad, my doctor took the time to tell me where I can improve my health. And maybe it's an uncomfortable conversation. Maybe it's less Chick-fil-A. God forbid. But it's like, you got to be ready for those opportunities to learn. And don't go fishing in a vulnerability scan assessment. If a real vulnerability scan will tell you got work to do, regardless of, like, it won't ask you to do this, do that, to get ready for the test. No, run the test, come in. It's like if your mom's coming home and you need to clean your room, you're gonna clean it only because your mom's coming home. Now just keep your room clean. You know what I mean? Like, just, it should be clean at any time. And so in the military we have spontaneous room inspections. That's a common thing too. It's like, oh, we'll just check in. We'll check in. So yeah, I think that was a tangent, but specifically vulnerability scans, or even penetration testing, asking you to provision a set of prerequisites before the test. It should maybe spark some red flags within reason, right? Within reason, right? Like, I think you need to give people notice. You need to give, if you're doing a full penetration test, you need to give IT administration notice of what's in scope of the test, when it's taking place, things like that, right? There's a thin line between change control and change management, which is necessary and good, and spoiling the test, right? Like, okay, guys, we got an inspection next week. True up everything now, right? Like, no, just let it run. Get a benchmark where you're at today, right? And so, yeah.
No, I completely agree, and I like how you brought up the fact that, some people are scared because, if they're managing those services. But like you said, if it was my company, I would have more questions if you're in my MSP and I'm not seeing any kind of alerts or any kind of, I guess, advice that you're wanting to give us. So I feel like it is really helpful to give that feedback. The environment's always changing. There's always going to be differences and new vulnerabilities. So definitely important, and definitely shouldn't be scared to do them at all. So now that we've talked a little bit more in understanding both tests and what they are, we've also noticed a lot of confusion in the field regarding when to deploy each test. So what should organizations, especially MSPs, consider when deciding between a vulnerability and penetration test? And how can these assessments fortify security measures when deployed strategically? Like Mike said, without, letting them know 8 minutes prior.
Again, for me, it's going to come back to like an order of operations. I'm not going to go for my best mile time before I understand what my benchmark is. And given the number one, the amount of resources penetration tests need, number two, the amount of legality and red tape there is in penetration tests of just getting clearance of what's in scope of the test, what's not in scope of the test, what can you do, what can't you do. There are going to be infinitely more cycles on a penetration test than a vulnerability scan. And again, here's the beautiful thing. Like, there's obviously services we offer that do vulnerability scanning, but there is open source vulnerability scanning tools that you can use, run against yourself, right? Like, get a benchmark, right? Get an idea of just something's better than nothing. So, you don't need to go to the gym to get your benchmark mile time. You can go to the gym to get it better. Yeah, for sure. But like, just understand where you're at today and get a general idea. There are some routine things you can do to get better awareness to it. I will preface it with this though. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I travel. I get to travel a lot. I have the blessing of being able to talk to a lot of people and meet a lot of really neat practitioners in our space that are professionals in what they do. I see people go to these conferences looking for nuggets of wisdom, and they pay thousands of dollars, but they don't have MFA enabled. They're looking for something new and majestic to learn about cybersecurity, but we've abandoned the basics. And so what I will preface it with, like, yes, vulnerability scanning is essential. It's good. It does assume a level of maturity has already been obtained. And so I would caution those watching live and catching it after the fact, whether it's audio or video. Don't abandon the basics, because we had a recent case study. I think it was January 19th, just about a week ago, Microsoft put out their whatever a compromise took place in November on their non-production email environment, password spray attack. That's easy pickings, boys and girls. That's easy pickings. There's no MFA on those accounts if they're getting owned by a password spray. And so for the majority, right? Like, if they're super complex attacks, yes, this was not one of them. And so the reality is most cybersecurity breaches happen due to low complexity of the vulnerability, not the lack of due diligence. So again, just something for food for thought, right? Because we always like to challenge when people hop in is, don't lose the basics. If you're trying to chase something, like vulnerability scanning and then penetration testing in your roadmap, shore up the basics. Don't be educated beyond your obedience type of thing, right?
I would have to agree with you on that. The best thing that you can do is always start with the basics. Obviously, you don't want to cheat. I mean, I will tell you this. When I was a kid, my class crushed those tornado drills, like 100%. We never lost.
That's because your teacher told you about them.
Not only that, our teacher told us, and then we had a bunch of demanding little children that would make sure that if you were out of line, they tattled on you.
There it is, man.
They
Police your own.
Snitches get stitches. Yeah,
we say police your own. That's right.
Exactly. So, there's that. But also, you mentioned the gym. And last time I went to the gym, I didn't get advice. I got told you need to start from the ground up. Like full restoration. It was bad. Trust me. When you do a vulnerability scan, you're not going to get news that's that terrible. It's never going to be that dire. You're going to have stuff in place already that's going to, you're going to be elevated a little bit higher than that. So you'll be fine. And, once you get everything in place, once you get a baseline, once you think, okay, this is what I think my security stack should be, this is how it should be configured, that's when you hit it. That's when you hit it. That's when you find out what's out there. Now, the one thing we haven't really touched on are the different levels that you can go through when it comes to vulnerability scanning. I mean, there are different tiers of this. And by tiers, I mean capabilities. You can get an absolutely amazing top tier vulnerability scan. And then you can go even higher than that, and you can hire somebody like Unit 221B. I've had experience with what their capabilities are when doing testing of applications. They will put it through the ringer. They will not just do, your normal everyday MITRE framework testing. They're going to go through and they're going to hit it with custom payloads. They're going to hit it with everything you could ever want. Like, they are going to be the equivalence of shock and awe, except it might make you want to drop and cry when they get done, depending on how it turned out. But there's different levels to it. So, when you get everything set up, you get a vulnerability scan done, you fix all of that. If you think, okay, great, what else could there be? There's always more. You can always learn. You can always grow. You can always better your defenses. If you look at where we are today, this is that part of that TED Talk. I'm sorry, Mike. I'm going to have to go into it.
I called it, brother.
You called it. You did. You
it was there. It was just waiting to be born, baby. Yeah.
We only get better when we're challenged. Security as a whole has only gotten to the level that it's at because somebody beat the security. Somebody has to be better than you, and you have to fail in order to learn. I hate to say it. I know that bruises egos, but you're not the brightest candle in the room. Somebody will always be better than you, and they are just hiding. And that's what vulnerability scanning and that's what pen testing is going to show. It's going to let the people that like to hide in the corner wearing all black do their thing and show you that you're not at the level you think you are. Now, here's the question that I would raise. When do you want to do this? Preferably before one of those people that's hiding in the shadows decides to take it upon themselves to do the testing and show you how bad your defenses really are. That will cost you a lot more money than getting a vulnerability scan or a penetration test done. I promise you, you don't want them to do it because they're bored. You'd rather hire them and have them actually do it for you. So there's, as Mike said, There's legal red tape that they have to go through. There's things they can't do. There's generally NDAs that are signed. They're not able to talk about the things they found or anything of that nature. It helps keep you safe. There's indemnification. There's all kinds of stuff in there. The important thing is the people that are doing the scans, it helps keep them safe from the law because they're going to be breaking into your stuff, doing it in a manner that is the same that somebody doing it unethically is going to be doing. And if somebody happens to be monitoring that and isn't aware that the testing is going on because you're not cheating and letting everybody know, that can have, terrible ramifications. So it helps to keep everything on the level, keeps everybody safe, and helps better your defenses. Thank you for coming for my TED Talk.
Yeah, there it is, man. There it is. It's magic. Now, I think, the only thought I had to add on to that was the reality that, just like you said, Matt, there's always something for us to learn. We have to accept that and be okay with it. But don't let everything we're saying deter you from don't not do vulnerability scans. Don't be scared away from them, right? Like it's kind of one of those things. It's like you don't like going to the doctor because they have nothing good to say. Like hey, don't not go. Don't do that. Don't do that. Better is the devil you know. And so especially when it comes to cyber risk and managing that, we've had a number of partners have success with, they have a new client, they're onboarding them. They're putting together a strategic roadmap for them of what would be in their first 12 months. And so if you conduct a vulnerability scan and you find that there's gaps and holes, well, guess what? They're getting recommended for their first 90 to 120 days. Endpoint security, cloud security, network hardening, things like that, right? And so, but it's important because it helps you build that strategy. So it just comes down to how do you strategically take care of organizations from an IT continuity perspective and mitigate risk rather than, well, I'm sure they're fine. Their old IT provider was okay. I don't really need to look under that rock. Just don't do that. There's a candor and integrity that, we need more of out of practitioners in the space. And I think that's what's really neat about our partners and those that they work with, that they take that stuff seriously. Hey, better is the devil you know. Better to go in and get the check. Better to go in and do the vulnerability scan. Better to get 2 or 3 home inspectors than don't do it and take the home as is, right? Like it's just, don't not do it. Don't not do it.
Oh, that's a great point. It's as simple as you'd rather be safe than sorry. So, just like what a lot of people say, it's not if, it's when. But you could be prepared rather than just waiting for that demise or sitting there with your fingers crossed, hoping that it doesn't happen to you because it can. Um, so once a company finds the right fit for who will deploy the penetration testing and or vulnerability scans, when is the optimal schedule? Is it a quarterly vulnerability scan, yearly penetration test? Should it be conducted when changes are made to the environment? What's your professional opinion on the cadence for these?
Tips.
Run with it.
Okay, so I'm going to have to throw this out there that vulnerability scanning I would recommend on a quarterly basis, if not more. There are solutions that you can leverage that give you the ability to run vulnerability scans at your own scheduling preference. And that's something that is always good to have because that's always going to be an ongoing vector that you need to be looking at. Vulnerabilities get released almost, I would say, hourly, it seems, probably quicker than that. They may not be announced or they may not be egregious enough to where they merit attention from the media, but that doesn't mean that they're not there and they're not something that needs to be addressed. Now, penetration testing is a completely different animal. Penetration testing, you're going to have to do a little bit in the form of balance. And I liken this to you're walking between 2 buildings on a high wire with absolutely no net because the price that you're going to have to pay for that pen testing is going to have to be offset by what you're actually seeing in terms of results or deliverables that you can actually provide to your customers. If you have a customer that's got 10 endpoints and you look at a penetration test and it's going to cost you $5,000 for a pen test, I mean, it's hard to really justify that. It's 10 devices. I mean, would there be a merit to it? Absolutely. But how long is it going to take to offset that? And are you going to be able to implement all of the things that they are looking to implement to bolster that security? So it becomes a little bit difficult. I would say, however, pen tests should be at least once a year. You can generally justify that, and most businesses should be able to justify that at least once a year as a form of proactive security. The more that you do up front, the more you're able to take care of, the more you can shore up, the less you're going to pay when something goes sideways. And you notice I say when. It's not if. Something's going to go sideways. Fortunately for us, our security stack is pretty amazing. We have technology that we use that others just don't. But for many, that is the reality. It's not, if it happens, it's just an accepting of it's going to happen. I need to be ready for this.
I like the preparation angle you're going with that. I kind of agree to kind of do the vulnerability scans quarterly. And you can make those quarterly goals. Like, this is what we found on this scan. This is what we want to have not show up on the next scan, and so on and so forth. Then at the end of the year, you have your big penetration test. Kind of like the gym analogy. You're not going to go to a bodybuilding or CrossFit event or anything of that nature without prepping and preparing and being, reasonable with it, because there's entry cost, and there's prizes, and the prize here is being able to show your clients the work that you've done over the year to give them better results on that next penetration test. So it really shows like a proof of concept of what you did over the year for your client.
Yeah, no. One thing that just came to mind was, whether it's getting a tattoo or picking out a hotel, you get what you pay for. Get what you pay for. So if you're going to go and invest the money in a penetration test, make sure you get what you pay for. Do vulnerability assessments, shore up your defenses, and then do the penetration test. Do not go and just immediately embark on a penetration test and fail miserably because it was that easy and you did not get what you paid for. It's like you overpaid for that, right?
Make
For
them
the amount
work
of
for
time.
it, basically.
Yeah, make them work for it. Get what you pay for. Like, if you're going to invest
Exactly.
that much money, don't make it a 2-hour endeavor for those conducting the test.
I mean,
And
if you're paying
so,
for a steak dinner, make sure that you're getting the steak, you're getting the wine, you're getting
yeah,
all the sides. I mean, get the
yeah,
entire
there you
meal.
go.
Don't just get the,
Yeah.
well, here's the potatoes. By the way, we got into your systems already.
Yeah. Don't go to the buffet and just get like a salad, like get what you pay for. And so, but yeah, I mean, if you get a salad at a buffet, that's fine. Right? Like, more power to you. But, if you're going to Fogo de Chao or Texas de Brazil and you're just doing the salad bar, you may be doing it wrong.
That should be outlawed. They should not have a salad bar at any of those places.
Oh, it's still good for you, but
No.
regardless. No, I think it's important, right? As we talked about that, there's a level of maturity that you're going to crawl, walk, run through your security posturing and what you leverage. There are tools that are open source and easy to stand up, relatively speaking, for internal vulnerability scanning. Get you an idea of where your benchmark is. That's where you'd then go and invite in a third-party entity like a Blockworks, like somebody who's a professional that runs these for other people, to get some additional clarity on, all right, now I know where I'm weak. And they will speak to personal trainer, how I get better, strategically get better, right? And how do I, get what I pay for? And in that case, time is money, with all the effort that you're putting out. And then, yeah, I think annual penetration test, if you have the funding and you're already doing routine or regular vulnerability scanning, that makes sense. Just don't flip-flop the order. Let it naturally evolve, for sure, would be my recommendation.
So we're all kind of on the same page there. So to wrap up today's discussion, could you provide a brief overview of the newly released Blockworks NVAP services and its relevance to our discussion today, such as what benefits it offers? How can tools like NVAP contribute to fostering a culture of cybersecurity awareness, optimize remediation efforts, reduce attack surface, and increase trust with clients?
Yeah, MVAP's a fun one for those that don't already know about it. So we've been working on this one. I want to say the platform was vetted for about 16 months. It was an endurance exercise for sure, making sure that we were crossing our T's and dotting our I's if they're like what platform we use, how do we build out the process, and how do we deliver the most value to our partners. But it's going to differentiate itself in a couple different ways, in the fact that number one, it comes in two different flavors. There's one that's going to be a one-time scan for those that want to do it annually, quarterly, whatever it is. But then the one other service that I think I'm pretty fond of, specifically because of the illumination it gives those that deploy it, are it's always scanning. Like it routinely scans hourly on some scans, daily on others. And the beauty with that is you specifically get to see, hey, let's say there's new vulnerabilities presented to the environment. That's one thing. But what if we go backwards? What if in the changes that are taking place in the environment, something somewhere goes awry and something we resolved 3 months ago now resurfaces? If you're only doing yearly vulnerability scans, you're going to come up and you're like, wait a second, how is this was on last year's scan and we resolved this? How did this happen? Right. So the cool thing with routine scans, whether it's daily, hourly, or weekly, is you get a lot more insight into, because there's so many changes taking place in any environment at any point, right? More than many people realize. So if you don't think there's enough changes or a lot of changes going on, then get yourself a change approval board. Don't make any changes without like 5 people's consent. And then you're going to realize, holy smokes, there's like 1,000 changes now. And so it's like trying to audit every time you swipe your debit card, right? Like you don't realize how many times you swipe it, but if you had to like write an explanation out on an expense report for every expense, you're like, holy smokes, I swiped it a lot, right? And so that's going to be my recommendation as far as frequency goes, as well as what MVAP's going to provide. But the neat thing with MVAP is it's 3 different types of scans. So we've seen a lot of other partners leverage an agent-based scanner where it's like an application like iTunes, like Chrome. You'll install on your machine, it'll run, it'll give you a score, and that's the end of the life cycle, right? For the most part, there's no guidance, there's no path to remediation, there's no recurring scan, there's nothing like that. And so, with the neat thing with MVAP is we certainly have an agent-based scanner. We also have a appliance. It's like a small desktop that we would provide our partner that goes and sits on the environment, and it scans laterally any other assets on the network. And the neat thing with this piece is you get so much visibility to what you don't know what you don't know. And so if you're only using a agent-based sensor type application, you're only scanning the assets you know are there. You're not scanning everything. And so it's like doing a home inspection. You don't look in the attic, you don't look in the basement. There's a lot that you may not know that you really need to know. And so that's where we find out like things like IoT, because no one thinks of their smart fridge when they're conducting a vulnerability assessment. But if the fridge can read you the weather, it could read bad act or something else, right? Like there's insight there. And so that's another piece that provides clarity and value to our partners, as well as the external scan. So we can also look at a website, a domain, public IP address, a firewall, public-facing WAN interface, things like that. So it's all of that combined into a single pane of glass. So it takes into account, hey, genetically you may be prone to this, but genetically you have a low vitamin D rate, but you live in Florida where there's a lot of sunshine. So I'm adding context to that vitamin deficiency, right? If you only look at the genetic report and say you need to take vitamin D, you're going to be low on it. You could take it, but there's no context in like, well, okay, where do they live? What's their environment like? Do they have an indoor job? Are they working outside most of the day, right? So there's a lot of context there in the strategic roadmap of MVAP that helps understand how do we really spend our time in the wisest way. So if SSH, for example, needs to be upgraded on a server, which is like a fairly normal protocol, but there's more secure forms of it, right? And it's not public facing, then the exposure of that vulnerability will be lower. Now, if SSH is open on the firewall, or anybody swinging by that has the IP address can get in, and your server has a deprecated form of SSH, high severity, high criticality, resolve that as soon as possible, right? And so it just provides a lot of really neat context to vulnerability scans in general that may just have you chasing your tail on certain things that are not important, but they may not be the most important. So that's a high-level overview. Obviously, you get some reporting. You get a neat online console to track your results, and Blockworks time to consult and review the reports and how to more effectively communicate that strategy to whichever environment you're working on hardening and strengthening.
Matt, anything from your side?
No, MVAP is his baby, so I'm just gonna go with what Mike's got.
That's all our baby, dude. We've all been in the kitchen cooking with it, but no, it's a lot
True,
of there's a lot of
true.
really cool stuff that we're cooking up, and we still have it yet to release. So plenty to still
Mhm.
roll out the hanger here in 2024, but MVAP's a cool one for sure.
MVAP is definitely it's going to be amazing to have out there. I mean, if you look at the entire suite that we have and just the things that we've had recently, bringing out MVAP, bringing out CDR, bringing out the EDR with all of its level of capabilities. I mean, these are things that we can bring to the table and will make us successful with you as a partner. Now, one thing I would like to bring up, and I know we didn't really touch on this, are what kind of questions should you be asking vendors about their application? You're going to put somebody's application in your environment. Shouldn't you know what has been done? I mean, I know for a fact that our security solution, we have pedigree around that. We have a report outlining everything that was done as far as testing, comparative information of it versus the results of other solutions, and basically where it stands. So if somebody asks us, hey, how confident are you in your product, we can say, well, it was validated by a third party to the highest standards possible, and we can provide parts of that report. It's publicly available to show where that stands. But you shouldn't be afraid to ask any of your vendors about that. If your vendor is scared that you're going to ask how often they validate their product, they probably don't need to have a product. If you're not going through and doing validation on your products regularly, that also raises questions. We do that. I can tell you that I find the craziest things that I humanly can from the dark web that are not released, that other vendors will not know about. And I throw them at our solution to make sure that we are capable of preventing it. That's the level that you want to look for with partners. That's what you want to look for to shore up your security. You want your vulnerability scans, you want the pen testing, but you want to make sure that your vendor is also adhering to the highest levels possible when it comes to their own efficacy and their own validation.
That goes into the conversation we had on the previous safety brief, just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
highlighting the partners who are asking those hard questions, who are wanting to know more information. It is important to know who you're partnering with and what they're providing you and how they're providing you that. So definitely hold people accountable for sure. Well, that concludes our discussion for today. Thank you both for sharing your time and expert opinions as always. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this week's safety brief. We look forward to catching you in the next episode. And if MVAP is something that you'd like to know more about, feel free to reach out by navigating to Blockworks' website or getting in contact with us via the comment section on one of the many platforms that the safety brief is available at.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Mhm. Thank you. Stay frosty.